The fresh paint smell had not even faded when the doorbell rang like an alarm. I opened it expecting flowers, but found a moving truck. 3 sisters, and my mother holding a clipboard. The youngest rolled her suitcase past me, announcing they were moving in. My phone buzzed with a notification that a new access code had been added to my smart lock. I realized then that they had not come to visit. They had come to take. My name is Morgan Rogers, and at 34 years old, I had finally purchased my sanctuary. It was a 4-bedroom new build in Cedar Hollow, Colorado, a place where the air smelled like pine needles and money. I stood in the center of the foyer, the heels of my boots clicking against the pristine white oak flooring. The silence in the house was heavy, expensive, and entirely mine. It was the result of a decade of missed holidays, 80-hour work weeks, and a savings account I had guarded like a dragon guarding gold. I looked at the single box I had carried in from my car. It contained my coffee maker, a bottle of champagne, and my laptop. That was all I needed for the first night. The closing papers had been signed less than 2 hours ago. The smell of fresh latex paint was still sharp in the air, a chemical scent that signaled a fresh start. I took a deep breath, letting the quiet wash over me. I was finally safe. I was finally alone. Then the doorbell rang. It wasn't a polite, tentative chime. It was a sustained, demanding blast that echoed through the empty hallway like a fire alarm. I frowned, glancing at my watch. It was 4 in the afternoon. I hadn't given the address to anyone except the utility companies and my lawyer. Maybe it was a neighbor welcoming me to the subdivision? I unlocked the deadbolt and pulled the heavy door open. The smile I had prepared died instantly on my lips. It wasn't a neighbor with a fruit basket. It was an invasion force. Parked right behind my sedan in the driveway was a 26-foot moving truck, its engine idling with a guttural rumble, and standing on my front porch, arranged in a terrifyingly familiar formation, were the 4 women I had spent my entire adult life trying to set boundaries with. Marlene, my mother, stood front and center. She was wearing her floral church blouse and holding a clipboard as if she were the foreman of a construction site. Flanking her were my 3 younger sisters, Paige, 31, Tessa, 29, and Brielle, 26. Behind them, looking sweaty and miserable, was Paige's boyfriend, struggling under the weight of a massive cardboard box. Surprise! Marlene didn't shout it. She announced it, stepping past me before I could even block the doorway. She walked into my foyer, spinning around to survey the high ceilings with a critical, satisfied nod. "Oh, Morgan, it is certainly spacious, a bit cold, but we can fix that." I stood frozen, my hand still gripping the brass door handle. "Mom, what is this? What are you doing here?" Marlene waved a dismissive hand at me, ushering my sisters inside. "Don't be silly, darling. We are helping. A house this big? For one person? It is ridiculous. You work all the time. You are never going to be here to enjoy it. Family makes a house a home, Morgan." Before I could process the sheer audacity of her statement, the machinery of their plan began to turn. It was terrifyingly efficient. They didn't look at me for permission. They didn't ask where they should put their coats. They moved with the synchronized confidence of a SWAT team that had memorized the floor plan. Paige marched past me, dragging a rolling suitcase that made a distinct thwack, thwack, thwack sound over the threshold. She didn't make eye contact. She just looked up the stairs and pointed. "I'll take the master suite on the 2nd floor," she called out over her shoulder. It has the soaking tub, right? My back has been killing me." "Excuse me?" I choked out, pivoting to follow her with my eyes. "Paige, stop. That is my room." She didn't stop. She didn't even slow down. Tessa followed close behind. Carrying a stack of monitors, Tessa worked remotely. Or at least, she claimed to whenever she wasn't between jobs. She looked at the den to the right of the entrance, the room I had specifically designated as my home office. "This works," she muttered, kicking the door open with her foot. "Good natural light. I need absolute silence during the day. Morgan, so when you leave for the office in the morning, try not to slam the door." My brain was misfiring. I felt like I was watching a car crash in slow motion. But I was the car. I work from home 2 days a week. Tessa, that is my office. We can share, she said breezily, disappearing into the room. I only need the desk from 9 to 5. Then came Brielle, the baby of the family. She was walking backward, her phone held high in front of her face, the screen glowing. She was live streaming. I saw the red recording dot pulsing on her screen. Hey guys, Brielle chirped, using that fake, high-pitched influencer voice she reserved for her 3,000 followers. So, we are finally here. Look at this place. The ceilings are literally 20 feet high. House tour time. Our house is finally done, and I am so obsessed with the vibe already. Our house. She panned the camera toward me. Say hi to Morgan. She is literally in shock right now. She is so happy we're all together. I instinctively held up a hand to block the camera, backing away. Brielle, turn that off. Now. She rolled her eyes, lowering the phone but keeping the camera running. Chill, Morgs. Content is king. This lighting is everything. I turned back to the door, where the boyfriend was heaving the heavy box across the threshold. He looked apologetic, but he kept moving. I looked down at the box in his hands. It wasn't a ragged, reused box from a grocery store. It was a brand new moving carton, taped perfectly shut. And there, written in thick black permanent marker on the side, was the destination. Primary closet, Mom's winter coats. I looked past him to the stack of boxes waiting on the porch. Kitchen, Paige's juicer, office, Tessa's files, patio, Brielle's yoga gear. The lettering was neat, uniform. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. This wasn't a weekend visit. They hadn't packed overnight. You don't label boxes like that unless you are planning to stay forever. I felt a cold prickle of sweat down my spine. This was a coup. Stop, I shouted, my voice cracking slightly. The sound bounced off the empty walls. For a second, everyone paused. The boyfriend froze mid-step. Marlene turned slowly from where she was inspecting my kitchen island, running a finger along the quartz countertop. Morgan, Marlene said, her voice dropping to that dangerous, disappointed tone she used when I was a teenager. Lower your voice. The neighbors will hear you. Is that how you want to start living in this nice community? Screaming at your mother? I am not screaming, I said, though my heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I am asking why there is a moving truck in my driveway. I just signed the deed 2 hours ago. I didn't invite you to live here. Marlene sighed. A long, tragic sound. She walked over and patted my cheek. Her hand felt cold. Invite? Morgan, we are family. We don't need invitations. Your sisters are struggling. Rent is up 40% in the city. You know that. And look at you. You have 4 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms. Are you going to sleep in all of them? Are you going to use all of them at once? Don't be greedy. It is ugly. It's not greed. Mom, it's my house. I paid for it. I paid 20% down. I pay the mortgage. And who raised you so you could get that fancy job? Marlene countered smoothly. Who sacrificed her 20s so you could have a career? We are doing this for you. Really, you get lonely. We all know you aren't good at being alone. I love being alone, I said, gritting my teeth. Nonsense, Marlene said, turning her back on me. Boys, bring the sofa in next. The beige one goes in the great room. They started moving again. The boyfriend heaved the box forward. Paige came back downstairs without her suitcase. The closet in the master is barely big enough, she complained. Morgan, you're going to have to keep your winter stuff in the garage. I have way more clothes than you. I am not keeping anything in the garage because you are not staying here, I said, stepping toward her. Paige just laughed, a sharp, dismissive sound. God, you're so dramatic, just like Dad. I looked around the room. My sanctuary was being dismantled. My silence was being murdered by the sound of boots on hardwood and the screech of packing tape being ripped off boxes. They were unpacking. They were literally hanging coats in the closet I hadn't even opened yet. I took a step back toward the front door, my hand clutching the single key I had been given by the realtor. I needed them out. I needed to call someone. I needed to reset reality. My pocket vibrated. I pulled my phone out, thinking it might be the realtor checking in. Maybe there was a mistake. Maybe I could tell her there were intruders. I looked at the screen. It was a notification from the smart home app I had installed on my phone just that morning. Smart lock system. New access code. Added. User. Marlene family. I stared at the screen. I hadn't given anyone the admin password. I hadn't set up any secondary codes. I looked up at Marlene. She was standing by the smart thermostat, tapping on the wall panel with a familiar, proprietary ease. She caught me looking and smiled. A smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Technology is wonderful, isn't it?" she said softly. "I had Brielle sync us up while you were arguing. We need to be able to come and go. Morgan, we live here now." The trap hadn't just sprung, it had locked. I watched Paige stand on the second step of the main staircase, her hand resting on the banister I had spent 3 weeks selecting. She looked down at me like she was the landlady and I was a tenant late on rent. "I am taking the big room at the end of the hall," she said, pointing a manicured finger toward the master suite. "The one with the balcony. It makes the most sense." I felt the blood in my veins turn hot and sharp. "That is the primary bedroom. Paige, that is my bedroom. My bed is being delivered there tomorrow." Paige waved her hand as if swatting away a gnat. "Oh, stop it. You are single. You do not need all that space just to sleep. Besides, I need a proper sanctuary. My back has been acting up, and I will be the one driving Mom to her appointments during the week, so I need to be well rested. Plus, when I come here on weekends to relax, I want a space that feels like a spa. You are always at that office anyway." She turned and began hauling her suitcase up the stairs, the wheels bumping against the fresh wood with a hollow, rhythmic thud. Before I could chase her down, a noise from the hallway distracted me. Tessa was dragging an ergonomic office chair. Where did she even get that? Into the den. She spun around, blocking the doorway with her body. "I am claiming this one," she declared. She didn't ask. She informed. "Tessa," I said, my voice rising an octave. "That is my home office. I work from home on Tuesdays and Thursdays. All the wiring for my server is in there." Tessa shook her head, pity in her eyes. "Morgan, you work in a corporate high-rise. You have a cubicle or an office or whatever corporate drones have. I work remotely. I am a freelance graphic consultant. I need absolute silence and a feng shui-approved workspace to be creative. You are barely here. And when you are usually just answering emails on your phone. You can do that at the kitchen island. I need a dedicated creative zone." She slammed the door. I heard the lock click. I stood there, vibrating with a mixture of rage and disbelief. It was a coordinated strike. While Paige secured the high ground and Tessa secured the perimeter, Brielle was already colonizing the common areas. She was in the center of the living room, opening a box marked Decor. She pulled out a neon sign that read, "Good vibes only," and held it up against my neutral-toned, sophisticated fireplace wall. "This is going to go right here," Brielle said, nodding to herself. "The aesthetic of this place is too sterile. Morgan, it gives hospital waiting room. I am going to warm it up. I am thinking boho chic for the patio. Lots of macrame, maybe a fire pit. Since I will be hosting my book club here, we need a vibe." I walked over and snatched the neon sign from her hands. "You are not hosting a book club here. You are not hanging this on my wall. This is not a commune. Brielle." Brielle looked at me with wide, wounded eyes. She pulled her phone out again. "Are you literally yelling at me over a piece of art? Wow. I was just trying to help you make this place livable." Then Marlene cleared her throat. She had unfolded a camping chair. They had actually brought camping chairs because they knew my furniture hadn't arrived yet, and set it up right in the center of the open-concept kitchen. She sat there like a queen holding court, her clipboard resting on her knees. "Morgan, come sit," she said, patting the air beside her. "You are being hysterical." "I am not being hysterical," I snapped, staying on my feet. I am being invaded. Mom, how did you get into the security system? I got the notification. You added a code. That is a digital breach. Marlene rolled her eyes. Oh, please. You use your birthday and the year you graduated high school for everything. 1991. 2009. It took me 2 tries. I just added us so we wouldn't have to bother you every time we went out for groceries. It is for your convenience. Really? My convenience? I stared at her. You hacked my house. I helped you, she corrected. Just like I helped you when you were 6 and couldn't tie your shoes. We are family, Morgan. We do not have boundaries like this. Remember when you and Paige shared a room? Remember how I taught you that sharing is the highest form of love? You have forgotten your roots. I walked over to her, planting my hands on the quartz countertop. This is not a box of crayons. Mom, this is a $700,000 mortgage. This is my credit score. This is my life. I want you to tell the girls to pack their things. I want everyone out. Now. The room went deadly silent. Paige had come back to the top of the stairs. Tessa opened the office door a crack. Brielle lowered her phone. Marlene looked at me for a long, uncomfortable minute. Then her face crumbled. It was a transformation I had seen 1,000 times. The strong matriarch vanished, replaced by the frail, unappreciated mother figure. So this is it? She whispered, her voice trembling perfectly. I raised you. I worked double shifts at the diner so you could go to that fancy college. I wiped your nose and paid for your braces. And now that you have made it, now that you have this palace, your first instinct is to kick me out into the street? I am not kicking you into the street, I said, fighting the urge to defend myself against a fabricated crime. You have a condo. You have a home. A condo with a leak in the roof, Paige shouted from the stairs. She stomped down, rallying to Marlene's defense. Mom has been complaining about the dampness for months. It is bad for her lungs. But you wouldn't know that, would you? You never call. And do you know how much rent is right now? Tessa added, stepping fully out of the office. My landlord raised my rent by $300 last month. $300. I literally cannot afford to eat and pay rent. You have 4 empty bedrooms. Morgan, 4. And you want us to struggle while you hoard square footage? It is disgusting. It is selfish. Brielle chimed in. Just because you are single and chose a career over a life doesn't mean you get to punish us. You have so much, and we have nothing. We just want to be safe. Why do you hate seeing us happy? They were closing in. It was a barrage of guilt. Economics and history. They were twisting my success into a moral failing. They made my hard work look like greed, and their lack of planning look like victimization. I looked around the room. I truly looked. This wasn't just a dramatic entrance. It was an occupation. Brielle had already arranged a row of succulents on the windowsill. Sunlight hit the green leaves, making them look like they had always been there. Paige's coat was hanging in the entryway closet. I could see the sleeve of her denim jacket poking out, on the kitchen counter, next to my lonely bottle of champagne. Marlene had placed her blood pressure medication and a stack of mail. I looked closer at the mail. It wasn't forwarded. It was addressed here, to this address. They had changed their mailing addresses before I even closed on the house. A cold realization washed over me. This wasn't a visit. This wasn't even a temporary crash. They had moved in mentally weeks ago. They had planned this while I was signing the escrow papers. They had packed their boxes while I was doing the final walkthrough. They were counting on social pressure. They were counting on the fact that I was the responsible one who wouldn't cause a scene. They were banking on the fact that I wouldn't call the police on my own mother. I took a deep breath. The smell of fresh paint was now mixed with the scent of Marlene's heavy perfume and the dusty smell of their old boxes. My new house smell was gone. I stood up straighter. I didn't scream this time. I didn't cry. I lowered my voice until it was flat, hard, and completely devoid of the daughterly deference they expected. You are not guests, I said. Marlene scoffed, reaching for her water bottle. Don't start again. Morgan, I am not starting anything. I continued, my eyes sweeping over each of them. I am finishing it. You did not ask to come here. You broke into my digital lock. You moved personal property into a dwelling you do not own and do not have a lease for. I paused, letting the legal reality hang in the air. You are trespassing. Every single one of you is currently committing criminal trespass. For a second, there was silence. Then, Brielle snorted. Then Paige chuckled. Finally, Marlene threw her head back and laughed, a loud, harsh sound that bounced off the high ceilings I had paid for. "Oh, Morgan," Marlene wheezed, wiping a tear from her eye. "You sound just like a lawyer. Trespassing? In your own mother's house? You watch too much television. Now move your car. Honey, the truck needs to back up so we can get the washing machine in." The room erupted in giggles. They looked at me not with fear, but with amusement. To them. My boundaries were not walls. They were just suggestions, easily stepped over. They thought I was joking. They thought this was just another family spat that would end with me surrendering and ordering pizza for everyone. They had no idea that while they were laughing, I was already reaching for the nuclear option. I did not scream again. I did not throw the vase of flowers Marlene had placed on the counter against the wall. Instead, a cold, crystalline clarity descended upon me. It was a sensation I knew well from high-stakes boardroom negotiations. That moment when the emotional noise cuts out and the brain switches entirely to logistics and leverage. The truth was, I had known, deep down in the pit of my stomach, beneath the layers of denial and hope, I had known this was a possibility. I replayed the last 6 months in my head as I stood there, watching my sisters treat my living room like a hotel lobby. The signs had been flashing like neon lights. Every time I had mentioned the construction updates, Marlene had used the plural pronoun. When we get the keys, she would say, when we settle in. I had corrected her every time, laughing it off as a slip of the tongue. When I get the keys, Mom, I would say. She would just smile that enigmatic, patient smile, the kind one gives to a child who thinks they know how the world works. Then there were the questions, specific, invasive questions that I had foolishly answered in the name of transparency. 3 weeks ago, over a lunch I paid for, she had asked about the closing costs. She wanted to know the exact date of the wire transfer. She asked which title company I was using. At the time, I told myself she was just being a protective mother, making sure her daughter wasn't getting ripped off. Now, looking at the organized invasion force in my hallway, I realized she wasn't protecting me. She was gathering intelligence. She was timing the strike, but fear breeds preparation. Because I had felt that itch of suspicion. I had done something I felt guilty about at the time, but which now felt like divine intervention. I looked up toward the ceiling, past the crown molding, to the small, unobtrusive circular device mounted near the entryway light, to the untrained eye. It looked like a standard motion sensor for a security system. It was actually a high-definition camera with audio recording, connected directly to a private cloud server. I had installed them yesterday, the moment the builder handed over the provisional keys. There was one in the foyer, one in the kitchen, and one covering the driveway. I had told myself I was being paranoid, that I was installing them to watch for package thieves or burglars. But the burglar I was most afraid of was currently sitting in my kitchen, drinking water from a bottle she had brought from her own fridge. They were already on camera. Every word they had said about occupying the rooms, every admission that they had planned this, every laugh at my expense, it was all being uploaded to a server they could not touch. I turned my back on them and walked deeper into the kitchen. I needed physical separation to execute the next step. I leaned against the refrigerator, shielding my phone screen from prying eyes. My thumb hovered over the folder I had created a month ago. I had named it Home. Legal. I tapped it open. It was beautiful. Inside lay the digital fortress of my ownership, the warranty deed, signed and notarized, listing Morgan Rogers as the sole grantee, the closing disclosure, showing the wire transfer of $140,000 from my personal savings account, the final settlement statement. There was no mention of a trust, no mention of a joint tenancy, no mention of Marlene, Paige, Tessa, or Brielle. I took a screenshot of the deed, cropping it to highlight my name and the date, Then I opened my messaging app and found Evan Cole. Evan was not a family friend. He was a shark I had hired 2 years ago during a contract dispute at work. He cost $400 an hour, and he was worth every penny. I typed quickly. They are moving in. Truck and driveway. Unpacking now. Refusing to leave. Need instructions. The 3 dots of his typing bubble appeared instantly. Evan did not waste time with pleasantries. Do not engage in an emotional argument. His text read, "That is what they want. Make a formal demand for them to leave. Do it in writing so there is a timestamp. Record their verbal refusal if you can. If they are still there in 15 minutes, you call the police and request a civil standby for trespassing. Do not let them establish residency. Do not let them sleep there tonight." I read the message twice. Do not let them sleep there tonight. That was the line. If they stayed the night. If they received mail. If they moved enough furniture in. The police might throw up their hands and call it a civil matter, forcing me into a months-long eviction process while they destroyed my house from the inside. I had to escalate. Now, I switched to the family group chat. The thread was currently full of Brielle's photos of the house with heart emojis. I typed a new message. My fingers were steady. "This is a formal notice. You are trespassing in my home. I am the sole owner of this property. I did not invite you to live here. You have 10 minutes to remove your belongings and vacate the premises. If you are not gone by 4:45, I will take further action." I hit send. Then I walked back into the living room. The ping of the notification sounded on 4 different phones almost simultaneously. Brielle looked at her phone first. She frowned, her nose scrunching up. "OMG. Morgan, you literally just texted us? We are standing right here." Marlene fished her reading glasses out of her purse, adjusting them on her nose. She read the message slowly, her lips moving slightly. Then she took the glasses off and looked at me with a mixture of amusement and disappointment. "Formal notice," she repeated, shaking her head. "You sound so cold. Morgan, like you are talking to employees, not your own flesh and blood. You act like you are a stranger to us. I am acting like a homeowner." I said, my voice was level. "Did you read the part about the 10 minutes? Paige laughed from the stairs, where she was struggling to maneuver a box of shoes. "Or what? You are going to ground us? Grow up. We are not going anywhere." I already unpacked my toiletries. I reached into my pocket and tapped the record button on the voice memo app. I held the phone casually in my hand, but I made sure the microphone was unobstructed. "So, just to be clear," I said, raising my voice slightly to ensure the recording would be crisp. "Mom, Paige, Tessa, Brielle, you are acknowledging that I have asked you to leave my property, and you are refusing to go?" Marlene stood up. She smoothed the front of her blouse. She looked around the room, at the boxes, at her daughters, and finally at me. She looked like a general surveying a battlefield she had already won. "Honey," she said, her voice dripping with absolute, unshakable confidence, "you can ask all you want. But nobody is leaving. This is family land now. You will thank us in the morning when you wake up and smell bacon cooking." She turned to Brielle. "Put some music on. Baby, the energy in here is too stiff." I stopped the recording. "Okay," I said. "I have my answer." Marlene didn't even look back at me. She thought the conversation was over. She thought she had called my bluff. I looked at the time on my phone. 5 minutes had passed. I didn't wait for the other 5. I walked out the front door, stepping past the moving truck that was blocking my driveway, and stood on the sidewalk. The late afternoon sun was beginning to dip behind the Rockies. Casting long shadows across the perfectly manicured lawn, I paid a landscaping crew to install. I dialed the non-emergency line for the Cedar Hollow Police Department. "Dispatcher." A voice answered. "Yes," I said, watching the silhouette of my mother moving through my living room window. "I need to report a trespass in progress. I have 4 individuals who have unlawfully entered my home and are refusing to leave. I am the sole property owner. I have the deed in my hand." "Are the individuals known to you?" the dispatcher asked. "Yes," I said, and the word tasted like ash in my mouth. "They are my relatives, but they are not residents. I will send an officer for a civil standby." the dispatcher said. Remain outside the property. I hung up the phone. Through the window, I could see Brielle dancing. They were celebrating. They thought they had won because I had walked out. They had no idea I was just opening the gate for the cavalry. I stood on the curb, my back to the house, watching the digital clock on my phone screen tick from 4:52 to 4:53. The street was quiet, the kind of aggressive suburban silence where you knew neighbors were peeking through their blinds, but nobody was coming out. Then, the heavy, calm prowl of a black and white SUV turned the corner. It didn't rush. It glided. I walked to the edge of the driveway to meet them. 2 officers stepped out. One was older, with the tired eyes of a man who had refereed 1,000 domestic screaming matches. The other was younger, sharper, his hand resting near his belt as he assessed the scene. I kept my hands visible and my voice steady. I did not want to look like the hysterical daughter. I needed to look like the property owner. "Good afternoon, officers," I said. "I am Morgan Rogers. I called about the trespassers." The older officer, whose badge read Henderson, looked past me at the moving truck blocking the driveway. "The truck says they are moving in, ma'am. You said trespassers. Usually, those 2 things don't go together. Is this a landlord-tenant dispute? Because if it is, that is a civil matter and we can't help you." "It is not a landlord-tenant dispute," I said, effectively cutting off the escape route police usually take to avoid family drama. "There is no lease. There is no rental agreement. There has been no exchange of money. I closed on this house at 2 o'clock today. I am the sole owner. These people entered without my permission using a hacked code on a smart lock. I have asked them to leave, and they have refused." I held out my phone. I had the screen brightness turned up to 100%. The PDF of the warranty deed was open. Zoomed in on the legal description and the signature line. "This is the deed. Recorded today," I said, pointing to the timestamps. "Grantee, Morgan Rogers. No other names. Here's the closing disclosure showing the wire transfer from my personal account." Officer Henderson squinted at the screen, then looked at his partner. The younger one, Officer Davis, nodded. "Okay," Henderson said. "Let's go see what is going on." We walked up the driveway. I stayed 2 steps behind them. I wanted the optics to be clear. They were the authority. I was the complainant. As we reached the porch, the front door swung open before Henderson could even knock. Marlene stood there. She had taken off her shoes. She was holding a dish towel. She looked for all the world like a woman who had been baking cookies for her grandchildren, not a woman orchestrating a property seizure. "Oh, thank goodness," Marlene said, putting a hand to her chest. "Officers, I am so glad you are here. My daughter is having some kind of episode. We are very worried about her." She gestured toward me with a look of pity that was so well crafted, it almost made me doubt my own sanity. "She has been under so much stress at work," Marlene continued, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "She just bought this big house, and I think the pressure just snapped something in her. We came to help her unpack, and she just started screaming about laws and trespassing. It is heartbreaking, really." Henderson paused. This was the narrative he was used to. The hysterical woman, the calm mother. I saw his shoulders relax. He turned to me. "Ma'am," he said, his voice softer now. "Your mother says she is here to help. Is there a reason you are trying to kick family out on moving day?" I did not scream. I did not call her a liar. I stepped forward and spoke directly to the officer's body camera. "Officer, I am 34 years old. I am of sound mind. I am telling you that these people do not live here. They are not residents. They are guests who have overstayed their welcome by exactly 45 minutes. I want them trespassed." From behind Marlene, Paige appeared. She was holding a silver key. I recognized it immediately. It was the spare key the builder had left in the kitchen drawer, the one I hadn't had time to hide yet. "We live here," Paige said, holding the key up like a talisman. "I have a key. See? You can't trespass someone who has a key. That makes us residents." Officer Davis looked at the key, then back at me. "She has a key, ma'am. She took that key off the kitchen counter 10 minutes ago." I said, my voice cutting through the air like a knife. She does not have a key because I gave it to her. She has a key because she took it. Ask her for her driver's license. Ask her what address is on it. Davis turned to Paige. ID, please. Paige froze. Well, I haven't changed it yet. We just moved in today. Where did you sleep last night? Davis asked. At my apartment. Paige stammered. So you are not a resident here, Davis said. He wasn't asking. He was stating, possession of a key does not establish residency if the owner is standing right here telling you to get out. Marlene stepped in front of Paige, her face hardening. Now listen here. This is my daughter's house. That means it is our house. I raised her. I paid for her life. You cannot tell a mother she cannot be in her child's home. Officer Henderson sighed. He had realized this wasn't going to be a quick mediation. He looked at Marlene with zero emotion. Ma'am, the law doesn't care about who raised who. The law cares about whose name is on the deed. He turned to me. Is her name on the deed? No, I said. Is there any written agreement allowing them to be here? No. Did you invite them? No. Henderson turned back to Marlene. Then you are guests, and the owner has revoked your invitation. You have to leave. Marlene laughed. A sharp, incredulous sound. You are joking. You are going to arrest an old woman because her daughter is having a tantrum? I am not joking. Ma'am, Henderson said, his hand resting on his belt. You have two choices. You can pack your personal items and leave voluntarily right now, or I can place you under arrest for criminal trespass, and you can leave in the back of my car. The silence that followed was absolute. I saw the exact moment the reality hit Marlene. She looked at the gun on Henderson's hip. She looked at the badge. She looked at me, waiting for me to crack, waiting for me to say, "Oh, never mind. Just let them stay." I stared back at her, my face a mask of stone. I said nothing. Marlene's face flushed a deep, blotchy red. For the first time in my life, I saw her hit a wall she could not manipulate. She couldn't guilt-trip the penal code. She couldn't gaslight a badge. Fine, she spat. The word came out like a curse. She turned to my sisters. Get the bags. We are leaving. But Mom, Brielle whined from the living room. I already set up the vibe corner. Get the bags, Marlene screamed, her voice cracking. For the next 15 minutes, I stood on the porch with the officers while my family dismantled their invasion. It was chaotic and angry. Paige threw clothes back into her suitcase in a ball. Tessa ripped her computer cables out of the wall, leaving black scuff marks on the paint. Brielle was crying, actually crying, as she took down her neon sign. They didn't take everything. The officers were rushing them. Just take the essentials, Davis ordered. You can arrange to pick up the boxes later through a third party. Let's go. Move it. They dragged their suitcases out the door, the wheels rumbling loudly over the threshold. They walked past me without looking at me. Paige bumped my shoulder hard with her shoulder as she passed. But she didn't say a word because Officer Davis was watching. Marlene was the last one out. She stopped at the bottom of the porch steps. She looked up at me. Her eyes were dry now, and cold. You will regret this, Morgan, she said. You chose a house over your family. I hope it keeps you warm at night. I closed the front door. The sound of the latch clicking into place was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. I locked the deadbolt. Then I engaged the smart lock. Then I put the security chain on. I stood in the foyer, breathing in the silence. It was over. They were gone. But my gut was still churning. I pulled out my phone and opened the security camera app. I needed to make sure they were actually driving away. On the screen, I saw the black and white feed of the driveway. The moving truck was backing out, gears grinding. My sisters were piling into Marlene's sedan, but before they got in, I saw Marlene stop Paige. She grabbed Paige's arm. The camera's microphone picked up the audio, clear as day against the quiet street. Marlene leaned in close to Paige's ear. She wasn't crying anymore. She looked focused, terrifyingly focused. Plan B, Marlene whispered. Call the lawyer. I watched them get into the car and drive away. The screen went still. I lowered the phone. My hand was shaking. just a little. Plan B. They hadn't just come to move in. They had come prepared for a war, and I had just fired the first shot. 7 days of silence followed the eviction. It was a heavy, suffocating silence, the kind that hangs in the air before a thunderstorm breaks. I spent the week fortifying my position. I changed the locks to high-security cylinders. I upgraded the cloud storage for the cameras. I even notified my employer's security desk that my family members were not to be allowed up to my floor. I thought I was preparing for a physical siege. Perhaps a brick through the window or a tire slashed in the driveway. I was wrong. The attack, when it came, did not arrive with a bang. It arrived in a crisp, cream-colored envelope delivered by a process server who looked bored. It was Tuesday morning. I was drinking coffee in my kitchen, enjoying the way the light hit the backsplash. When the doorbell rang, the man outside verified my name, handed me the thick packet, and walked away without a word. I looked at the return address. Sterling, Vance, and Associates. It was a law firm I recognized from billboards downtown, the kind that advertised aggressive representation for people who wanted to sue trucking companies or insurance giants. They were not subtle, they were sharks. I carried the envelope to the kitchen island and slid it open. The paper inside was heavy. High-quality bond. Breach of contract and constructive trust claims regarding the property at 424 Oak Ridge Lane. My heart hammered a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. I began to read. The legalese was dense, but the narrative they were spinning was clear, and it was horrifyingly creative. According to the lawsuit, I, Morgan Rogers, had not purchased this home for myself. Oh no. According to the filed complaint, I had entered into a verbal and written binding agreement with Marlene Rogers to purchase the property as a multi-generational family asset. The suit claimed that my mother had provided emotional labor and childcare services. I have no children, and financial guidance that enabled me to save for the down payment. With the explicit understanding that the home would be a shared residence, my hands shook slightly as I turned the page. They were suing me for specific performance, demanding the court force me to let them move in, and asking for damages for intentional infliction of emotional distress caused by the eviction. But the real weapon was buried on page 4. Notice of lis pendens. I stared at the Latin words. I knew enough real estate law to know what this meant. They had filed a notice of pending litigation against the property title. It was a chokehold. As long as this lawsuit was active, I could not sell the house. I could not refinance the mortgage. I could not take out a home equity line of credit. They had effectively frozen my biggest asset. It was a hostage situation, and my house was the victim. I flipped to the exhibits attached at the back. Exhibit A. I stopped breathing. It was a photocopy of a document titled Family Occupancy and Asset Sharing Agreement. The date at the top was November 12th of last year. The text was simple, almost childishly so, but legally dangerous. It stated that I, Morgan Rogers, acknowledged that funds used for the home purchase were family assets, and that I agreed to grant Marlene Rogers and her minor and adult children lifetime rights of residency in the property. And at the bottom of the page, above a black line, was my signature. I touched the paper. It looked like my signature. It had the sharp loop on the M. It had the trailing S at the end. To a stranger. It was me. I felt a wave of nausea. I had never seen this document in my life. I had never signed it. I grabbed my phone and dialed Evan Cole. He answered on the second ring. "Check your email," I said, my voice tight. "I just scanned and sent you a lawsuit. They are suing me. And Evan, they have a contract. A signed contract." I heard the rapid clicking of a keyboard on his end. "Give me a minute." "Morgan." I waited, pacing the length of my kitchen island. 1 minute felt like an hour. "Okay," Evan said, his voice dropping an octave. "I am looking at it." "This is dirty. Morgan, this is really dirty. It is a lie," I said. "I never signed that. That is not my document. The money was mine. I can prove every cent came from my payroll deposits." "I know," Evan said. "But look at the strategy. They filed a lis pendens. They know they might lose in court eventually. But that could take 18 months. They are betting that you will break before then. They think you will get tired of the legal fees and the stress and just settle. They want you to cut them a check or let them move into the basement just to make this go away. I will not settle. I said, I will burn this house to the ground before I let them blackmail me. Don't do that, Evan said dryly. Arson invalidates your insurance. Let's look at this document. Zoom in on the signature. I pulled the image up on my iPad. Look at the slant, I said, squinting. My signature usually tilts about 15 degrees to the right. This one is almost vertical. And look at the pressure points. The ink looks heavy on the upstrokes. When I write, the upstrokes are light. Someone traced this, or they practiced it. It is a good forgery, Evan admitted. Better than I would expect from amateur hour, but forgery is hard to prove without the original. They will claim they lost the original and this is a copy. It becomes a he said, she said. I stared at the document, feeling a cold rage settling in my stomach. They weren't just greedy, they were criminal. They had sat down, drafted a fake legal contract, practiced my signature, and then paid a lawyer to file it in court. This was premeditated fraud. Wait, Evan said. The typing stopped. What? Look at the bottom left corner, Evan said. The notary stamp. I zoomed in. It was a standard notary seal. State of Colorado. Commission expires. June 2027, and below it, a handwritten date. November 12th. Okay, I said. So they got a crooked notary to stamp it. That happens. November 12th. Evan repeated slowly. Morgan, check your calendar for November 12th of last year. I switched apps. Scrolling back through my digital calendar. November 10th, November 11th. I stopped. A tight, victorious smile spread across my face. Oh my God, I whispered. Where were you? Evan asked. I was in Chicago. I said, I was at the Midwest Urban Planning Conference. I flew out on the morning of the 10th and didn't fly back until the evening of the 14th. Are you sure? Evan asked, his voice sharpening. Can you prove it? I have the flight receipts. I said, my brain racing. I have the hotel folio from the Palmer House Hilton. I have photos of me presenting on stage on the 12th. I have credit card charges for dinner at a steakhouse in downtown Chicago at 7 that night. Bingo, Evan said. You cannot sign a document in front of a Colorado notary in Denver if you are physically standing in Illinois eating a steak. It is not just a lie. I said, it is a provable lie. It is perjury, Evan corrected, and it is fraud upon the court. And since they mailed it to you, it might even be mail fraud, though that is a stretch. But the notary? If we can prove you were out of state, the notary loses their license. And your mother's affidavit swearing this document is real, that becomes a criminal offense. I looked at the document again. The terrifying legal weapon had just turned into a smoking gun pointed right back at them. They had been so desperate to create a paper trail that they hadn't bothered to check my schedule. They assumed I was just at work, or at home. Locally, they didn't know about the conference. What do we do? I asked. Do we call the police again? No, Evan said. Not yet. If we go to the police now, it halts the civil case while they investigate, and that could take forever. We use this. We let them think we are scared. We let them think they have you cornered. I will file a simple answer denying the claim. I won't mention the Chicago alibi yet. I want to depose them. I want to get your mother under oath, on camera, swearing that she watched you sign this document in her kitchen on November 12th. I understood immediately. It was a trap. You want them to double down. I said, I want them to commit to the lie. Evan said, I want it on the record. Once she lies in a deposition, there is no going back. Then, we drop the flight records. Then, we nuke them. I looked at the thick envelope on the counter. 10 minutes ago, it had looked like my doom. Now, it looked like their confession. Do it, I said. Draft the response. Let them think they are winning. Morgan, Evan warned, they are going to escalate. If they don't get a reaction from this lawsuit, they will try to hit you somewhere else. They want to embarrass you. They want to make you look unstable so the family agreement looks like a mercy mission. Let them try. I said, I have my receipts. I hung up the phone. I picked up the lawsuit and walked over to my shredder. Then I stopped. No, this wasn't trash. This was evidence. I walked to my safe, punched in the code, and placed the envelope inside, right next to my real deed. My phone buzzed again. It was a notification from LinkedIn. Paige Rogers commented on your post. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I knew the war was shifting fronts. They had failed to take the house by force. They had failed to intimidate me with the law, though they didn't know that yet. Now, they were going to try to destroy the one thing that allowed me to buy the house in the first place, my reputation. I walked to the window and looked out at the empty driveway. They had no idea. They thought they were playing checkers. They thought they were playing poker. But I was the one holding the royal flush, and I was going to wait until the pot was overflowing before I laid it down. November 12th. The date they chose to forge my life away was the date that was going to save it. I went back to my laptop and opened my email. I found the folder marked Travel, 2025. There it was. United Airlines confirmation, DEN to ORD. Depart, November 10th. Return, November 14th. I printed it out. The sound of the printer whirring was the only noise in the house. It sounded like justice. I pinned the flight receipt to the corkboard in my home office, right next to the calendar. Try harder. Mom, I whispered to the empty room. You are going to have to do better than that. But as the sun set, casting long shadows across my floor, I knew Evan was right. The lawsuit was just the paperwork. The real dirty work was about to begin, and it wasn't going to happen in a courtroom. It was going to happen in the one place where truth didn't matter. Only perception did. They were coming for my job. Evan did not ask nicely for the original document. He demanded it. He filed a formal request for the production of the family occupancy agreement in its original wet ink format within 48 hours. The response from Sterling, Vance, and Associates was a masterclass in legal stalling. They claimed the original was currently in secure storage off-site and could not be retrieved immediately due to archival protocols. They sent a high-resolution scan instead, accompanied by a smug letter suggesting that the digital copy should be sufficient for preliminary discovery. That is the tell. Evan told me over the phone, if they had the real thing, they would be waving it in my face. They would want to slap it down on the table to shut us up. Hiding it means they are afraid of what a microscope will find. He was right. We didn't wait for the original. Evan sent the high-resolution scan to a forensic document examiner he used for high-stakes fraud cases. The report came back in 24 hours, and it was devastating. The examiner noted 3 critical anomalies. First, the pressure of the pen stroke was completely uniform. When a person signs their own name, they naturally vary the pressure. Light on the upstroke, heavy on the downstroke. This signature had the flat, monotonous weight of someone drawing a shape rather than writing a name. Second, under 400% magnification, there were micro-tremors in the curvature of the R in Rogers. It was the hesitation of a hand trying to trace a line. Not the fluid muscle memory of a signature written thousands of times, but the third point was the clincher. The examiner overlaid the disputed signature with a signature from a birthday card I had given Marlene 2 years ago, a card Evan had subpoenaed from the trash bin of my memory. They matched perfectly. Not just similar, identical. No person signs their name the exact same way twice. Evan explained, it is physically impossible. The geometry always varies slightly. If 2 signatures overlay perfectly, one is a trace of the other. Armed with the forgery analysis, we turned our sights on the notary. His name was stamped clearly on the bottom of the document. Arthur J. Miller. Evan's investigator did a background check on Mr. Miller. He was a 70-year-old semi-retired insurance agent operating out of a strip mall in Aurora. He had 3 prior complaints against his commission for clerical errors. Evan drafted a subpoena for Mr. Miller's notary journal. In Colorado, notaries are required by law to keep a chronological log of every act they perform. They have to record the date, the type of document, the name of the signer, and crucially, How they verified the signer's identity. When the copy of the journal page arrived, the smoking gun wasn't just smoking, it was on fire. The entry for November 12th listed a family agreement under the column for signer. It said Morgan Rogers, but under the column for type of ID, Mr. Miller had written, photocopy of CO driver's license provided by mother. I stared at the entry, and a memory unlocked in my brain like a rusty door. 2 months ago, a Sunday afternoon, Marlene had called me, sounding frantic about paperwork for her condo. She claimed she needed to update her beneficiary information for her life insurance and wanted to make sure she had my legal details correct. Then she had pivoted. Oh, and Morgan, while I have you, she had said, her voice casual, I am organizing a file for the new house warranties. You know how builders try to weasel out of fixing things. I want to keep a backup file for you. Send me a picture of your driver's license so I can file the warranty registration if you are busy at work. It had sounded so helpful, so maternal. I had texted her a clear photo of my license within 5 minutes. I felt a cold flush of betrayal wash over me. She hadn't wanted to help me with warranties. She had wanted my ID to shop for a notary who would break the rules. She had found Arthur Miller, an old man likely charmed by a sweet grandmother's story, and convinced him that her busy executive daughter couldn't make it in person, but had authorized the signing. She showed him the photo of my ID, maybe cried a little about family unity, and he had stamped the paper. It was clumsy, it was illegal, and it was exactly the kind of shortcut Marlene thought she was entitled to. We have them, Evan said. His voice was grim but satisfied. This is not just a civil dispute anymore. This is fraud. I am filing a motion for summary judgment on the grounds of fraud and forgery, and I am attaching the Chicago travel records just to twist the knife. We filed the motion on a Thursday. We attached everything. The flight receipts showing I was in Illinois, the hotel folio, the time-stamped photo of me on stage, the forensic report on the trace signature, and the notary's own journal admitting I wasn't present. The reaction was almost immediate. Sterling, Vance, and associates went silent. The aggressive emails about constructive trusts stopped. The threats of depositions evaporated. Then, the family channel opened up. My phone buzzed on Friday night. It was a text from Paige. Can we talk? Mom is really upset. She thinks this has gone too far. We are family. Morgan, we shouldn't be paying lawyers to fight each other. Let's just meet for coffee and work out a schedule. It was the classic pivot. When bullying failed, they switched to negotiation. When force failed, they switched to guilt. They wanted to work out a schedule. They still thought they were getting into the house. They still thought this was a misunderstanding that could be smoothed over with a latte and a hug. I looked at the text. I thought about the fake signature. I thought about the lies in the lawsuit claiming I had promised them my home. I thought about Marlene using my own driver's license, my identity, as a tool to rob me. I did not feel guilty. I did not feel sad. I felt done. I typed a reply, my thumbs moving deliberately over the glass screen. All communication must be directed to my attorney. Evan Cole, do not contact me personally again. I blocked the number, then I blocked Marlene, then Tessa, then Brielle. I sat in my living room, the silence finally feeling like peace rather than emptiness. The camera in the corner blinked its reassuring green light. I had won. The evidence was overwhelming. The judge would see the motion next week, and the lawsuit would be dismissed. They might even face criminal charges for the forgery. It was over. I poured myself a glass of wine and walked to the window. Looking out at the dark street, I felt invincible. I had protected my castle. I had outsmarted the invasion, but I had forgotten one thing. Marlene Rogers did not just fight for land. She fought for control. And if she couldn't control me in my house, she would try to control me in the world. My phone chimed with an email notification. It wasn't a text. It was a work email. I frowned. It was 9 o'clock on a Friday night. Why was I getting a work email? I opened the app. The subject line made my stomach drop through the floor. Subject: Urgent meeting request. HR matter. It was from the Director of Human Resources at Northbridge Planning Studio. Dear Morgan, we have received a series of disturbing complaints regarding your conduct and professional integrity. Given the serious nature of these allegations, we need to meet first thing Monday morning. Please be prepared to discuss the attached documentation. I didn't open the attachment. I didn't have to. I knew, with a sickening certainty, who had sent the complaints. I had locked the front door. I had barred the windows. But I had left the back door to my career wide open. Monday morning at Northbridge Planning Studio usually began with the hum of espresso machines and the quiet click of mice as architects and planners settled into their KD drawings. Today, the silence felt heavy, like the air before a tornado touches down. I walked past the reception desk, keeping my head high, my heels striking the polished concrete floor with a steady, rhythmic beat. I offered a polite nod to the receptionist, but I didn't stop to chat. I had a 9 o'clock appointment with the guillotine, or rather, with Sarah, the Director of Human Resources. I walked into her office and closed the door. Sarah was a woman who specialized in neutral expressions and liability management. She gestured to the chair opposite her desk. On the desk lay a notepad with a list of bullet points. "Good morning." "Morgan?" Sarah said, her tone professional but guarded. "Thank you for coming in. We need to discuss some communication the firm received over the weekend." I sat down, placing my hands in my lap to hide the fact that my knuckles were white. "We received 2 voicemails on the general line and an email sent to the partners." Sarah continued, "They were from a woman identifying herself as your mother, Marlene Rogers." I didn't flinch. I had expected this. Marlene knew that my career was my pride. If she couldn't take my house, she would try to burn down the reputation that paid for it. "What did she say?" I asked, my voice calm. She expressed, "Grave concern for your mental well-being." Sarah chose her words carefully. She claimed that you are suffering from a severe manic episode, that you are disconnected from reality, and that you have become aggressive toward your family. She suggested that you might be a safety risk to yourself and your colleagues. She asked us to, and I quote, "intervene before she hurts someone." It was a brilliant, poisonous narrative. By framing it as concern, Marlene stripped me of my agency. If I got angry, I proved her right. If I denied it too vehemently, I sounded defensive. I took a breath and reached into my leather tote bag. I pulled out a black folder. "Sarah," I said, maintaining eye contact, "I want to be very clear. I am not having a breakdown. I am the victim of an orchestrated campaign of harassment and extortion by my estranged family." I opened the folder and laid the documents out on her desk, one by one. "This is a police report filed last week for criminal trespass against Marlene Rogers and her daughters at my private residence. This is a copy of a fraudulent contract they forged to try and claim ownership of my home. And this is a motion my attorney filed on Thursday accusing them of fraud and perjury." Sarah's neutral expression cracked. She picked up the police report, scanning the officer's notes about the eviction. "They are currently retaliating because I evicted them." I continued, "This call to the firm is not an act of concern. It is a calculated attempt to damage my professional standing to leverage a settlement in a property dispute. It is harassment, plain and simple." I slid one final piece of paper across the desk. It was a letter from Evan Cole, on his law firm's letterhead. "My attorney has prepared a cease and desist letter. If they contact the firm again, he is prepared to include Northbridge Planning Studio as a protected party in a restraining order request. I am happy to sign whatever liability waiver you need, but I am asking the firm to recognize this for what it is: a domestic dispute spilling over boundaries I have tried very hard to maintain." Sarah read through the documents. She let out a long breath, the tension in her shoulders visibly dropping. She wasn't dealing with an unstable employee. She was dealing with a legal liability from an external source that she could handle. "Okay," Sarah said, closing the file. "Thank you for bringing this context. Morgan, we obviously take allegations of instability seriously, but documentation speaks louder than voicemails. We will flag their numbers and email addresses to be blocked at the server level. Security will be notified that they are not permitted on the premises. She pushed the folder back to me. I'm sorry you are going through this. Morgan, just keep it out of the office as much as possible. We can support you, but we need you focused on the downtown redevelopment project. I understand. I said, standing up, it won't affect my work. I walked out of her office feeling lightheaded. I had survived the first wave. Marlene had tried to paint me as the crazy daughter, but she forgot that in my world. In the corporate world, paper trails were king. She brought rumors. I brought police reports. But the war wasn't contained to phone calls. At lunch, I made the mistake of opening social media. I usually avoided it, but I needed to see the blast radius. It was Paige. Of course it was Paige. She had posted a photo of the three sisters and Marlene sitting in a cramped living room, presumably Marlene's condo, looking dejected. The caption was a masterpiece of vague booking. It is funny how money changes people. You spend your whole life supporting someone, cheering for their success, and the minute they get a little power, they forget where they came from, heartbroken to be shut out by someone we loved so much. Please pray for our family during this difficult transition. We just want peace. It didn't name me. It didn't have to. The comments section was already a firing squad. So ungrateful, wrote a cousin I hadn't seen in 10 years. Money is the root of all evil, commented an aunt who owed me $500. Stay strong. Marlene, you were always too good to her, wrote a neighbor. My thumb hovered over the reply button. I wanted to scream. I wanted to post the police report. I wanted to post the forged document. I wanted to tell them that the support they gave me was $0 for college and a lifetime of guilt trips. Don't do it. I told myself, do not feed the trolls. If I responded, I gave them oxygen. If I argued, I looked petty. The only way to win this game was not to play. I took a screenshot of the post and the comments. I emailed them to Evan with the subject line, Exhibit D for defamation claim. Evan's response came within the hour. He didn't just file it, he fired back. He sent a formal letter to Marlene's lawyer, a different one this time, likely a cheap consult they had found, stating that any further contact with my employer or defamatory public statements would be added to the damages in the civil suit. He explicitly mentioned tortious interference with business relations. That legal phrase must have rattled them. Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed with a notification from a number I didn't recognize. It was a text. I didn't know she was going to call your boss. That is messed up. I just wanted a place to work. I don't want to get sued. Morgan, please don't include me in the damages. It was Tessa. I stared at the screen. The United Front was cracking. Tessa, the pragmatic one, the one who just wanted a quiet office, had realized that Marlene's scorched earth policy was going to burn her too. She was scared. Then, 5 minutes later, a DM from Brielle on Instagram. Paige is literally psycho for posting that. She is making us look like trash. Can you just tell Mom to stop? This is embarrassing. I didn't reply to either of them. I let their messages hang there, unanswered. Let them sweat. Let them realize that their alliance with Marlene was a liability, not an asset. They were starting to turn on each other, panic setting in as the reality of the legal consequences became clear. Marlene was losing control of her soldiers. I worked until 6 o'clock, burying myself in zoning maps and density calculations. I was productive. I was professional. I was everything they said I couldn't be. I packed up my bag and headed for the elevator, checking my phone one last time to order takeout. There was a notification from my banking app. It wasn't a transaction alert. It was a security alert. Profile update. Attempted. Billing address. I froze in the lobby of my building. I opened the app. Someone had logged in, or tried to, and requested a change of address for my primary checking account. They had tried to change it to 1402 Maple Drive, Unit 4B, Marlene's condo. They weren't just trying to ruin my reputation or squat in my house. They were trying to reroute my financial statements. They were trying to intercept my mail. A cold shiver went down my spine, sharper than the winter wind waiting outside. This wasn't just a family dispute anymore. This was identity theft. I called the bank's fraud department immediately. Freeze everything, I told the operator, walking out into the dark parking lot, and tell me exactly what IP address made that request. Marlene had made a fatal mistake. She thought she was fighting a family squabble where the rules were soft. She didn't realize she had just handed me the final nail for her coffin. She wanted to be part of my financial life? Fine. I would make sure the only financial interaction we ever had again was her paying my legal fees. The garage was cold, smelling faintly of concrete dust and the exhaust fumes from the moving truck that had departed a week ago. I stood alone under the fluorescent strip lights, staring at the pile of boxes my family had been forced to leave behind. Evan had been explicit in his instructions. Do not open them. Do not rummage through them. Treat them like evidence at a crime scene. Just inventory them so they cannot claim you stole a diamond necklace or a wad of cash. I held my phone up, recording a continuous video as I walked slowly around the stack. There were 12 boxes in total. Most were hastily taped. The cardboard buckled from being shoved off the truck by Paige's boyfriend during the eviction. I narrated clearly for the recording. Item 1. Large wardrobe box, labeled winter coats. Item 2. Medium box, labeled kitchen miscellaneous. I moved to the third box. It was a smaller carton, heavily taped, but split along the top seam where it had likely been dropped. The flap gaped open just an inch, revealing a chaotic jumble of papers inside. It was labeled Marlene, personal. I leaned in to get a clear shot of the label, and that was when I saw it. Wedged between a stack of magazines and a spiral notebook was a window envelope. It was one of those ominous ones with red text stamped on the front. Urgent. Open immediately. Through the plastic window, I could read the recipient's name clearly. Morgan Rogers. My breath hitched. Why was my mail in Marlene's box? I moved the phone closer, zooming in until the address block filled the screen. Morgan Rogers. 1402 Maple Drive, Unit 4B, Cedar Hollow, Colorado. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. 1402. Maple Drive was not my address. It was Marlene's condo. I stared at the envelope, my heart thumping a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. The postmark was from 3 weeks ago. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a letter I had accidentally left at her place. This was a piece of mail from a credit card company, addressed to me, but diverted to her home. I didn't touch the box. I didn't pull the letter out. I took 3 high-resolution photos from different angles, ensuring the name and the wrong address were legible. Then I ran back inside and called Evan. They tampered with my mail. I said the moment he picked up, Evan, I found a letter in their boxes. It is addressed to me, but it was sent to Marlene's condo. It looks like a credit card statement or an application. Evan's voice was sharp. Don't touch it. If you open it, they can claim you tampered with their property. But this is huge. Morgan, diverting mail is a federal offense. It explains why they wanted to move in so badly. If they live with you, they can intercept the mail before you see it. Why would they do that? I asked. Though deep down, I already knew. Check your credit report, Evan commanded. Right now, while you are on the phone with me. I sat down at my kitchen island and opened my laptop. My fingers flew across the keyboard as I logged into the credit monitoring service I hadn't checked in months. The dashboard loaded. My score was still high, which was a relief. But then I clicked on the tab marked Inquiries. I gasped. Chase Bank, credit card application. Date, January 5th. Status, action required / pending verification. Well? Evan asked. There is a hard inquiry. I whispered, January 5th. That is 4 days before I closed on the house. Someone applied for a credit card in my name. It wasn't you? No, I said. I was in a blackout period for the mortgage. I wouldn't dare apply for new credit. That is why it is pending, Evan said, his voice turning cold and analytical. The bank probably flagged it because the address didn't match your credit profile, or because of the mortgage activity. That letter in the box? That is probably the verification request. Marlene was trying to get the card, but she couldn't activate it without that letter. I sat back, feeling a wave of nausea. This wasn't just about a place to sleep. It wasn't just about family unity. This was a systematic attempt to hijack my financial identity. They planned to move into my house, intercept the verification letter, approve the card, and then live off my credit while I went to work to pay the mortgage. It is a parasite strategy, Evan said, echoing my thoughts. They wanted to graft themselves onto your financial life. What do? I asked. We go nuclear, Evan said. I am calling the postal inspector immediately to file a report for mail fraud, and I am adding a cause of action to our counterclaim for identity theft and civil conspiracy. Morgan, lock everything down. If they have your social security number, which Marlene definitely does, they might try again. I spent the next 2 hours in a frenzy of digital fortification. I placed a credit freeze on all 3 major bureaus. I called my bank and set up verbal passwords that only I knew. I enabled 2-factor authentication on every account, linking it to an authenticator app rather than my phone number, just in case they tried to swap my SIM card. I ordered 2 more outdoor cameras for the perimeter of the house and sensors for the garage windows. I was turning my home into a fortress, not against burglars, but against my own blood. Just as I finished setting up the new digital barriers, my email pinged. It was a message from Evan, forwarding a letter from Sterling, Vance, and Associates. Subject: settlement offer. Rogers versus Rogers. I opened the attachment. The tone had changed completely. Gone was the aggressive legal posturing. Gone were the threats of constructive trust. Dear Mr. Cole, in the interest of resolving this family matter amicably and avoiding further court costs, our clients propose the following settlement. Marlene Rogers and her daughters agree to voluntarily dismiss their complaint with prejudice. In exchange, Morgan Rogers will grant them a temporary occupancy license for a period of 6 months to allow them to secure alternative housing. They agree to pay a nominal rent of $500 per month. I stared at the screen. They were terrified. They knew the forged signature on the family agreement was about to be exposed. They knew I had the flight records from Chicago. They probably suspected I had found out about the credit card inquiry. They were trying to cut a deal before the judge saw the evidence of their fraud. But they still didn't get it. They still thought this was a negotiation. They thought they could trade a withdrawal of a fake lawsuit for 6 months of free rent in my house. 6 months. Enough time to intercept more mail. Enough time to establish tenancy rights that would take a sheriff to break. Enough time to make my life a living hell. Evan had included a note. They are blinking. This is a desperation move. How do you want to respond? I didn't need time to think. I didn't need to sleep on it. I typed my reply to Evan. Tell them no. Tell them I am not interested in a settlement. Tell them that I found the mail in the garage, and I have printed the credit report inquiries. I paused, my fingers hovering over the keys. I wanted them to know exactly where they stood. I wanted Marlene to know that her plan B had just blown up in her face. I typed the final instruction to Evan. Send them this exact message. I will let the judge decide, and I have enough evidence to make you regret this. I hit send. Outside, the wind howled against the siding of my house. It was a lonely sound, but it felt clean. I was alone in my fortress, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes and the ghosts of a family that had never really existed. But for the first time since the moving truck arrived, I didn't feel besieged. I felt dangerous. The courtroom smelled of floor wax and stale coffee, a sterile purgatory where families went to die. I sat at the defense table next to Evan, my spine pressed against the hard wood of the chair. I was wearing my charcoal suit, the one I wore for high-stakes presentations. I looked like a woman who owned a home, on the other side of the aisle. My family looked like they were auditioning for a tragedy. Marlene was wearing a faded cardigan I hadn't seen in 10 years, clutching a tissue. My sisters were dressed in muted colors, devoid of makeup, sitting with their heads bowed. It was a performance. They were painting a picture of humble, struggling women crushed by a corporate tyrant, their lawyer, a man named Mr. Vance, who wore a suit that was slightly too shiny, stood up to give his opening statement. He didn't talk about contracts. He talked about feelings. Your Honor, he began, his voice dripping with theatrical sorrow. This is not a case about square footage. It is a case about promises, a mother who sacrificed everything for her daughter, sisters who just wanted a safe harbor. Ms. Rogers has a 4-bedroom home. She lives alone. She is barely there. Yet she refuses to shelter her own flesh and blood. We are asking the court to enforce the verbal and written agreement that this house was purchased as a family asset. Marlene sniffled audibly. Paige wiped a dry eye. I felt a flash of anger, but Evan placed a hand on my forearm. "Wait," he whispered. When it was Evan's turn, he didn't use adjectives. He used receipts. "Your Honor," Evan said. Standing up, "The defense intends to prove that there is no such agreement. This is a case of trespassing, fraud, and attempted financial identity theft." He walked to the podium. "Let us look at the financials." Exhibit A flashed onto the monitors. The warranty deed. Sole owner, Morgan Rogers. Evan read, "Not Marlene Rogers, not the Rogers Family Trust, just Morgan." Exhibit B. The wire transfer for the down payment. $142,000. This money came from a savings account solely in my client's name, fed by direct deposits from her employer, Northbridge Planning Studio. There is not a single deposit from the plaintiff, Marlene Rogers, not 1 cent. Mr. Vance tried to object. "Your Honor, the contribution was emotional. Mrs. Rogers provided guidance." The judge, a stern woman with reading glasses perched on the end of her nose, waved him down. "Emotional guidance is not legal tender in the state of Colorado." "Counselor, continue." "Mr. Cole." Evan nodded. "We claim the plaintiffs entered the home unlawfully. The plaintiffs claim they were invited residents. Let's go to the tape." Evan played the security footage from the day of the invasion. The courtroom watched in high definition as my sisters dragged their suitcases over the threshold. The audio was crisp. "We are here always. Baby." Marlene's voice echoed in the quiet room. "Morgan is never home. We will take over." Then the camera showed the boxes. Evan paused the video on the labels I had photographed. Kitchen, Paige's juicer, primary closet, Mom's winter coats. "This is not a visit," Evan said. "This is a hostile takeover. They were unpacking before the owner had even taken her coat off." Marlene shifted in her seat. The poor mother act was slipping. She looked annoyed that her voice was being played back to her, but the centerpiece was coming. "Let us address the so-called family occupancy agreement," Evan said. Mr. Vance sat up straighter. This was his smoking gun. He handed a copy of the document to the bailiff. "Your Honor, this document proves Morgan Rogers agreed to share the home." Vance said, "It is signed and notarized." Evan walked to the center of the room. He didn't look at Vance. He looked at Marlene. "We requested the original document." Evan said, "The plaintiffs failed to produce it. They claim it is lost. So we are working with a copy dated November 12th of last year." Evan turned to the judge. "Your Honor, I would like to direct your attention to Exhibit D. These are flight records from United Airlines. And Exhibit E, a hotel folio from the Palmer House Hilton in Chicago." The courtroom was silent. On November 12th, the date this document was allegedly signed in a kitchen in Cedar Hollow, Colorado. My client was 800 miles away in Chicago, Illinois. She was giving a keynote presentation at an urban planning conference. Here's a time-stamped photograph of her on stage at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I looked at Marlene. Her face had gone pale. The tissue was crumpled in her fist. "Unless Ms. Rogers has the ability to teleport," Evan continued, his voice sharpening. "She did not sign this document. It is a forgery." Mr. Vance scrambled. "Your Honor, perhaps the date was recorded incorrectly by the notary." Evan cut him off. "We subpoenaed the notary's journal." Exhibit F. The ledger page appeared on the screen. Entry for November 12th. Evan read, "Type of ID presented. Photocopy of driver's license provided by mother." The judge's head snapped up. She looked at Marlene. "You presented a photocopy of your daughter's ID to a notary without her presence?" Marlene stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. I had her permission. She told me to handle the paperwork. She is always so busy." "Sit down, Mrs. Rogers," the judge barked. Evan wasn't done. He had one more nail for the coffin. We believe the motivation for this forgery and the forced entry was not just housing. Evan said, it was financial predation. He put the photo of the open box on the screen, the urgent envelope with my name on it, sitting in Marlene's box. This letter was found in the plaintiff's possession after the eviction. Evan said, it is a verification letter for a credit card application, an application made in Morgan Rogers' name 4 days before the house closed, an application my client did not make. A murmur went through the courtroom. This wasn't just a family spat anymore. This was a crime scene. They diverted her mail to Mrs. Rogers' condo. Evan said, they applied for credit in her name. They forged a contract to force their way into the house so they could intercept the mail and live off her assets. This isn't a family reunion, Your Honor. It is a long con. The judge took off her glasses. She looked at Mr. Vance, who was now sweating profusely. Counselor, the judge said, her voice dangerously low. Did you know this document was signed in absentia? Mr. Vance looked at Marlene, then back at the judge. I was assured by my client that the document was legitimate. Your Honor. The judge turned her gaze to Marlene. It felt like a physical weight. Mrs. Rogers, the judge said, do you understand that submitting falsified evidence to this court is perjury? Do you understand that forgery is a felony? Marlene trembled, but she didn't crack with tears this time. She cracked with rage. It is my house, she screamed, pointing a shaking finger at me. I raised her. I fed her. Everything she has is mine. She is ungrateful. She is a selfish, cold-hearted witch who cares more about her bank account than her own mother. The silence that followed was absolute. The mask had fallen completely. There was no sweet old lady left. There was only the entitlement, ugly and raw, exposed under the fluorescent lights. Sit down and be quiet, the judge ordered, her voice like a hammer strike, or I will hold you in contempt. Marlene sank back into her chair, her chest heaving. Paige looked at the floor. Tessa was crying. Real tears this time. Tears of someone realizing the ship was sinking. Brielle looked like she wanted to be anywhere else on the planet. The judge gathered the files in front of her. She stacked the deed, the forgery report, and the credit inquiry photos into a neat pile. I have heard enough. The judge said, I do not need to take this under advisement. The evidence is overwhelming. She looked at me, then at Marlene. Everyone remained seated. The judge commanded, I am ready to issue my ruling. I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for 3 weeks. Evan didn't smile, but he gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. Marlene was staring at the table, her hands gripping the edge so hard her knuckles were white. She knew, for the first time in her life, she wasn't going to talk her way out of it. The judge adjusted her robe, the fabric rustling in the pin-drop silence of the courtroom. She did not look at the papers anymore. She looked directly at the 4 women huddled on the plaintiff's bench. In 20 years on the bench, the judge began, her voice level but carrying a weight that pressed everyone into their seats. I have seen many property disputes, but rarely have I seen a case where the intent to defraud and manipulate was so transparently documented. She picked up the family occupancy agreement and held it up. The court finds that this document is a forgery, she declared. The evidence provided by the defense, specifically the travel records and the notary's own admission, is irrefutable. There is no valid contract. There is no family agreement. There is only a deed, and that deed bears one name, Morgan Rogers. Marlene flinched as if she had been slapped. Therefore, the judge continued, the plaintiff's request for specific performance and occupancy is denied with prejudice. You have no legal right to reside in, enter, or access the property at 424 Oak Ridge Lane. It is the sole and exclusive property of the defendant. Mr. Vance, their lawyer, closed his laptop quietly. He knew it was over, but the judge was not finished. Regarding the defendant's counterclaims, she said, shifting her gaze to me, the court finds that the plaintiffs engaged in a coordinated effort to trespass and harass. Furthermore, the evidence regarding the credit card application and the diversion of mail is deeply disturbing. While this is a civil court, I have a duty to report potential criminal conduct. She looked at the court reporter. I am ordering that the record of this trial, specifically Exhibit F regarding the notarization and Exhibit G regarding the mail tampering, be forwarded to the District Attorney's Office for review regarding charges of forgery, perjury, and identity theft. A sound escaped Paige's throat, a strangled, high-pitched whimper. She brought her hands to her mouth. She had thought they were fighting for a bedroom. She just realized they might have fought their way into a felony record. The court also grants the defendant's request for a permanent protection order, the judge ruled. Marlene Rogers, Paige Rogers, Tessa Rogers, and Brielle Rogers are hereby restrained from coming within 500 feet of the defendant, her home, or her place of employment. You are to have no contact with her, no phone calls, no text messages, no emails, no third-party messages. If you violate this order, you will be arrested. Do I make myself clear? But she is my daughter, Marlene burst out, unable to help herself. You can't tell me I can't talk to my own daughter. I just did, the judge said, her voice like steel. And if you speak to her again, Mrs. Rogers, you will do so from a jail cell. Do not test this court. Marlene slumped back, defeated, the fight drained out of her, replaced by a sudden, terrifying realization of her new reality. Finally, the judge concluded, the court awards damages to the defendant. The plaintiffs are jointly and severally liable for the defendant's legal fees in the amount of $12,400. Additionally, the court awards $5,000 for security upgrades and emotional distress. Judgment is entered. Court is adjourned. The gavel came down. Bang. It was a sharp, final sound. It sounded like a chain breaking. I sat there for a moment, letting the words wash over me. Sole and exclusive property, no contact, liable. Evan leaned over and shook my hand. We did it, Morgan. It is over. I stood up. My legs felt steady. I turned to look at them one last time. My sisters were in shambles. Paige was openly weeping, her face buried in her hands. Realizing that a fraud investigation could destroy her own job prospects, Tessa was staring at the wall, pale and ghost-like. Brielle was hurriedly texting someone, probably trying to distance herself from the disaster, and Marlene was looking at me. Her eyes were red-rimmed, filled with a toxic mixture of hatred and fear. She looked small, all my life. She had seemed like a giant, a force of nature that could not be denied. Now, stripped of her guilt trips and her manipulations, she was just an angry woman who had bet everything on a lie and lost. She opened her mouth, perhaps to curse me, perhaps to beg. I didn't give her the chance. I didn't smile. I didn't frown. I simply turned my back on her. It was the most powerful move I had ever made. I picked up my briefcase, feeling as though I was finally setting down a suitcase filled with rocks that I had been carrying for 34 years. Mr. Vance approached Evan. My clients have some personal items left in the garage, he said, his voice defeated. How do you want to handle the retrieval? I spoke before Evan could answer. They are not coming back to the property, I said calmly. I will hire a professional moving company to pack the remaining boxes. They will be delivered to a storage unit. I will send you the key and the bill. If they step foot on my driveway to pick up so much as a sock, I will call the police and enforce the restraining order. Mister? Vance nodded. He didn't argue. Understood. I walked out of the courtroom, down the long marble hallway, and into the bright afternoon sun. The air tasted sweet. It tasted like freedom. An hour later, I pulled into my driveway. The house stood against the blue Colorado sky, tall and modern and clean. The moving truck was gone. The noise was gone. I walked up the path and unlocked the front door. I stepped inside and closed it behind me. Click, whir, lock. The smart lock engaged. The security system chirped its reassurance. System armed. I walked into the living room. The spot where Brielle had tried to hang her neon sign was bare and pristine. The kitchen counter where Marlene had held court was empty, save for a vase of fresh tulips I had bought for myself on the way home. The silence was absolute, but for the first time, it didn't feel lonely. It felt expansive. It felt like potential. I poured myself a glass of water and stood in the center of the room, looking out at the mountains through the sliding glass doors. I had lost a mother. I had lost 3 sisters. I had lost the illusion of a happy family that I had spent decades trying to buy. But as I looked around the walls that I had paid for, at the floor I had defended, I realized what I had gained. I had my dignity. I had my peace. And for the first time in my life, I was safe. "This house is finally mine," I whispered to the quiet room, "and my life is finally mine, too." I took a sip of water, watched the sun dip below the horizon, and smiled. It was going to be a very quiet, very beautiful night. Thank you so much for listening to my story and following me on this crazy journey to reclaim my life. I would love to know where you are tuning in from, so please drop a comment below and let me know your country or city. Let's see how far this story has traveled. If you enjoyed this series and want to hear more real-life drama, please make sure to subscribe to the Morgan Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button so we can share this victory with even more people. Stay strong and protect your peace.